Hi, I'm Hazel, and this is a guide to the Zek'voz, Herald of Inzoth raid boss in Uldir on normal and heroic difficulty. This is a 3-phase fight with a lot going on, and I could easily see this becoming a roadblock in progression for some guilds. Titan Spark is random damage that the Titan discs will zap out onto a few people at a time. There's no dodging or avoiding that, so healers will just need to deal. Might of the Void is a combo of moves that heal.
The projection of Cthulhu? Oh! Oh, I see. Okay.
So healers will just need to deal. Might of the Void is a combo of moves that he'll unleash in his current tank. It's basically a Shatter in a Void Lash sandwich. Void Lash starts it, which reduces healing taken by half.
Okay.
He follows it with a Shatter, which increases physical damage taken, and then seals it off with a second Void Lash, which will make the tank immune to healing if they took the whole combo. Either A, use big cooldowns and tank swap right after the combo, or B, do the tank swap in the middle of the Void Lash sandwich so that nobody has to eat both slices of Void bread.
Alright, that's
simple. The Void Lash is a pretty big frontal cone, so nobody except the active tank should be anywhere near the front of the boss.
Okay,
At
that's
100
bad.
energy, the boss uses Surging Darkness. That's basically a series of shadow donuts that you need to get out of. They happen pretty quick and do devastating damage if you get caught, so stay on your toes until they're done. It's easier to dodge if you're in the close to mid-range zone, since those donuts aren't quite as thick. Everything that we've looked at so far happened through the whole fight.
And then
a short ways in, Phase 1 will officially start and bring in some new abilities.
This is Protectors of the Endless.
Targets random players and zaps them with a Cthulhu chain lightning kind of deal. If anybody is within 10-ish yards of the target when it goes off, it'll leap to them, and each leap it makes does more damage. Targets should get out of the group, and everybody should give them some space. Silithid Warrior ads spawn in this phase, and those guys ignore threat. They'll chase random people and chomp them with their jagged mandible bleed. Anyone with a Silithid friend should bring it onto the boss so that people can cleave it down more quickly. At 65%, the boss enters Phase 2. No more I-Beam or Silithid Warriors to deal with now, but you'll still have Shadow Donuts and Void Lash sandwiches.
Well, you got these attack
I wrote this before lunchtime, don't judge me. This phase gets new ads with the Nerubian Void Weavers. Those spam cast Void Bolt, which you can interrupt and you really should. They can be stunned as well as kicked, so use what you have to prevent the Void Bolts while you kill them. Roiling Deceit is a dot that goes onto random players, spawning an ominous cloud when it expires. If you get the dot, run away from the group to drop the cloud somewhere out of the way. Do be careful of Shadow Donuts while you're out there. Those clouds stick around, and if anybody touches them, they spawn Guardian of Yogg-Saron ads. Those ads will do raid damage at 100 energy or when they die, and they're completely avoidable, so just don't touch the clouds.
Two old gods in the same fight.
The boss moves into Phase 3, or so I'm told by the Dungeon Journal, since none of my raid testing groups made it that far. Void Weavers and Cloud Dots will stop, Shadow Donuts and Void Lash sandwiches will continue, and there's one big new thing to deal with. Overload ramps up the random damage from Titan Spark in this phase, which isn't the big new thing. That would be the Orb of Corruption. From the sounds of it, it falls from the sky and needs to be intercepted by a player to prevent big raid damage. That player gets 100% health, damage, and healing for some amount of time, and at the end of it, they're mind-controlled with Will of the Corruptor. While mind-controlled, they cast a kickable fear called Psionic Blast that needs to be interrupted. On normal difficulty,
I love how Blizzard... So, you know what? I'm gonna finish this, okay? Sorry.
You can break those MCs with damage, so stun, CC, and damage your friends out. On Heroic, the mind control lasts until death and triggers an 8-yard AoE fear called Void Wail when they do die. Hopefully by the time it gets to that, you've nearly killed the boss, because otherwise it's going to get really messy. Other changes to the fight on Heroic, the Jagged Mandible from the Silithid Warrior ads in Phase 1 will reduce movement speed by 50%, making it a bit slower to grip them up. And the Nerubian Void Weavers from Phase 2 gain Shadowbind, which means they cannot be gripped or otherwise moved. And that is Zek'voz in Uldir. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you out, please consider leaving it a like. Check out my channel for more raid guides and other WoW stuff, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye!
So what I think is funny about this is that Blizzard... So let's look at what he does. So this has the Manaroth attack, okay? The Titan Sparkers, which is random damage. Let's see, the Frontal Cone, yeah, this is basically just Manaroth. And Surging Darkness is the circles. That's exactly the same as Protectors of the Endless. The I-Beam is the same as Cthulhu and Undasta. These ads, there's tons of different bosses that have these ads on them. It's hard for me even really to think of one specifically. The caster ads, I mean, there's a million fights that have that too. I can't think of one specifically. Ominous Clouds, let's see. Oh yeah, you need to run out with that. Pretty simple. And let's see, what are the other? Yeah, these are all copy pastas. And Phase 3, this is new. This thing right here is pretty much new here. So what happens is, I believe like his like circle empowered AoE, it becomes empowered, and then you have to run out and run back in more quickly, which I do think is kind of interesting. It's a new iteration on an old mechanic, which is good, right? It's definitely good. And then Will of the Corruptor is the exact same mechanic as you would have in what's his name, Cho'Gall. In Cho'Gall, it was the exact same thing. And as soon as you got mind controlled, you do more damage. But if you died, you know, obviously, you know, you'd be hostile to everybody. So this is pretty much the same thing. Grim Batal, yeah, there's multiple ones, but yeah, it's just kind of funny to see that. Cthulhu. Oh my god, that is Cthulhu in the background. What the fuck? Yo, that guy just saw that. I didn't even notice that. Oh my god. He's just chilling back there. Yogg-Saron also. That guy's an asshole. Nobody likes him. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Hi, I'm...
Vectis is the next one, right? Mr. Weird Mouthy Boy? Oh, is there, yeah. Give her a like. Yeah, yeah, I'll link. Actually, yeah, let me do this right now. This is her channel right here. And you guys can go subscribe to her channel and like all of her videos. Everybody go subscribe to her channel. She's obviously put a lot of work into these videos, and they're actually pretty good. So make sure to do that, okay? All right, next one is Vectis.
Hazel, and this is a guide to the Vectis raid boss in Uldir on normal and heroic difficulty. Lore-wise, this is basically what you get when you mix the Zandalari corrupted blood plague with the blood of G'huun. It grows teeth.
Not
Everyone
good.
will end up diseased in this encounter, and the best that you can do is just try to all get diseased somewhat evenly. The tank mechanic here is Evolving Affliction, which is a stacking dot that you'll want to tank swap for. Start with swapping on 2 or 3 stacks. It used to do more back on beta, but not everything makes it to live. This is honestly a bit of a sleeper fight for tanks. Omega Vector is the defining mechanic of this encounter. It's a 10-second disease that jumps to a new host when it expires, and there's no getting rid of it. Distance doesn't work, immunities don't work, death doesn't work. I don't know if anybody tried Hearthing out, but it probably doesn't get rid of it. When Omega Vector expires, it leaves behind a permanent stack of lingering infection, which makes you more vulnerable to nature damage. Multiple stacks of Vector go out at the start of the fight, and it only gets worse from there. Since you can't get rid of it, the key is to spread it out evenly. There's going to be a variety of ways to coordinate that, but the basic principles are moving away from the group if you have high stacks of infection, and staying clear of Vector victims if you currently have Vector yourself. You don't want to be getting multiple stacks of that. Otherwise, stay pretty closely grouped to help out with healing and offer yourself up as a host. So that's bouncing around and stacking up lingering infection on everybody. Vectis will cast Contagion, which is a raid-wide pulse of nature damage. You'll barely notice it early on, but as lingering infection piles up, it'll get scary and eventually require raid
nature damage.
Vectis will target a player with Gestate, and after a few seconds it'll stun them, do some AoE pulsing, and spawn a Plague Amalgam ad. If you get targeted, get a bit of space from the group while you can. Once you're stunned, it's everybody else's job to move away if they're still within 5 yards. You don't have to go far. The Plague Amalgam will repeatedly cast Immunosuppression, which is a raid-wide healing absorb. That sucks, especially with all the raid damage going around, so everyone needs to switch and kill the ad ASAP.
That's badass. That's new.
The boss turns into a puddle and we're into phase 2.
Alright.
You cannot damage the boss in this phase, so all of your powers should go into avoiding damage. Liquefy would be the boss puddle, and he's going to gloop across the room with some pretty good speed. Getting tagged by that gives you extra stacks of lingering infection, so do your best to dodge. He'll set up in a spot and use Blood Geyser, which spits lines of blood towards players. Those will also give you infection stacks if they hit you, and it's important to dodge those
So you just don't get up by the...
Oh,
look at that idiot just got killed.
Red rings on the ground. Those have to be soaked, or else they spawn more Plague Amalgam ads. Only one person needs to get in each one, and it does a nice chunk of damage, so they should go in fairly healthy. If ads do spawn, they should be taken down immediately, but I have faith that as 2018 World of Warcraft raiders, we all know how to soak rings by now. After a while of that, he unpuddles and we're back to phase 1. That's the whole fight.
Not true.
The mechanics are exactly the same on heroic as they are on normal, but because this fight is such a gear check, it's probably still going to be a tough one early on. So that is Vectis and Uldir. Thanks for watching. If this video helped you out, please consider helping me out with a thumbs up. Check out my channel for more raid guides and other WoW stuff, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye!
That was a good one. That was a good one. I like that. Wipe tomorrow. No, that one's going to be easy. So basically, here's what he does. So this boss is called HIV, and he puts HIV and AIDS on every single player, and he puts ferocious AIDS on the tanks, so they can't really deal with his AIDS quite as often. And then he puts this circle on people that you need to move out of, and then there's the very, very bad ad. That's what his name is, the bad ad, the Plague Amalgam. and you just need to kill him so he can make everybody so they can't heal. And then he turns into a giant puddle of period blood that shoots out discharge at different members of the raid. So as you can see here, he's doing these different lines, and you need to make sure that you don't get hit by those. So as you can see, there we go. You saw that right there. That's what happens. So watch Mr. Priest here. That's a mistake. You don't do that. Why period blood? It felt like the right thing to say. And the boss is kind of, the boss is, I don't know, I think it would make sense. Let me see the next one. What's the next boss here? It is Zul Reborn. Does she have the guide for Zul Reborn? I'm pretty sure she doesn't. And so we'll have to go back to Fat Boss. Mother is of cause. Okay. Zul, no, not Zul, just Zul. Okay, let's see. Where are we at? Talok. All right, let me just minimize this here. Uldir guide. All right, full playlist, 8 videos. And we have Zul. Okay.
Today we finish our boss coverage of Uldir with the 6th boss in the instance, which is Zul Reborn.
Yes, this 2-phase encounter feels like a real step up over the previous 5 bosses in the instance, and it appears to be the first fight where a particular class is almost required. Phase 1 is an ad management phase, and phase 2 is a burn phase, where you need to kill the boss off before you run out of platform to work with. Now with all of these boss previews, let's jump straight into phase 1.
So Zul in this phase will primarily cast Shadow Barrage. This deals damage to a random player in your raid. It's unavoidable and therefore just needs to be out-healed throughout the entire...
It's not barrage, it's barrage. How did he say it again?
Straight into phase 1.
So Zul in this phase will primarily cast Shadow Barrage.
Barrage.
This deals damage to a random player in your raid. It's unavoidable and therefore just needs to be out-healed throughout the entire phase. Zul will however still melee hit, so you will need a tank to pick him up. More impactful is the Pools of Darkness. One of these pools will be up almost constantly throughout the fight. These pools deal extremely large ticking damage to the entire raid until they despawn. However, if a player stands within it, the raid damage will be prevented and instead the single player will take small bursty damage every 2 seconds.
Oh wow,
As these pools
so it's like
spawn
Armageddon.
randomly throughout the encounter space, we deemed it unviable to assign players to them, instead just had any players nearby go and soak them.
Alright.
Last to mention in Zul's toolkit is Dark Revelation. This 10-second debuff causes large raid-wide damage when it expires. It does, however, drop off with distance. As soon as a player receives the debuff, they'll want to move as far away from the raid as possible, right up against the edges. On top of the raid-wide damage, you'll also have 5 minion of Zul ads spawn from the debuff player. These ads will fixate and chase down a random player and causes all players within 5 yards of their target to be feared for 12 seconds.
That's
this fear is a curse, so it can be dispelled by shamans. You can, however, kill the ads by removing their Bound by Shadow buff. This is a large absorption shield, so you can just DPS it until it's removed, but it is a magical debuff, so you can just master spell it, which will instantly kill all 5 of the ads. On Heroic, you'll have to deal with 2 Dark Revelation debuffs at the exact same time, so we simply countered that just by having 2 priests. You can also individually dispel the ads with things like Purge, which isn't ideal, but keep in mind the new Arcane Torrent works, so you could come up with some sort of rotation if you wanted. Next to talk about is the main
else have to be OP somehow,
which is the ads.
Now from the pool you'll have all 3 different types of ads. You'll have a Crusher, a Blood Hexer, and 4 Krogs. The Crusher has a frontal cone, so it must be tanked facing away from other players. But most importantly, it must be tanked away, or at least moved away from other mobs, before it reaches full energy, as it will cast Thrumming Pulse, buffing all mobs, including Zul, if they're within 30 yards, with a 50% damage increase for 40 seconds.
Oh shit.
So although of course it is important that the guy is away from all other mobs before he does reach full energy, if any mobs that are nearby do happen to get the buff and they're very close to dying anyway, it's not too big of a deal.
So you
and of
cleave
course,
them
that
down,
way you will increase the amount
and
of
then you
damage
run
your
him
raid is
out
doing
whenever he's
because
about to get full
everything's
energy.
stacked up.
Simple.
Moving on to Blood Hexers, these also need to be tanked away from Zul because of their Congeal Blood. When cast, a single Ica ad will spawn directly underneath the Blood Hexer and will start travelling towards Zul. And if they reach him, they'll just heal him for a large amount. Now the Icas can be stunned, knocked back and gripped, so you'll want to make the most of that whilst you cleave them down.
It's pretty simple.
The only other ability you'll notice directly on the pool is their Blood Shard cast. This deals a burst of damage to the lowest health raid member, potentially killing that target if it's not interrupted. So it's important that interrupts are solid on these mobs just to prevent any random deaths. Last to mention is the Bloodthirsty Krogs. These guys simply melee hit, so it's best to have these under Zul and just passively cleave them down. It is important, however, that you do not ignore these mobs, because 1, they heal themselves for 200% of the damage they deal, so if your multi-dotting and cleaving on them isn't strong enough to kill them, they'll just never die. But more importantly, they do gain energy over a long period of time, and at 100%, they will explode and deal massive pulsing damage to the raid over 10 seconds.
61,000, so it's a wipe
order in which to
if one of those gets
and
full.
How it works across the phase.
So as you've already seen, if you've been keeping a keen eye on the footage, we decided to tank the Crusher and the Blood Hexer away from Zul on one tank, moving them away 10 seconds or so after the pull, just before the Crusher gains 100% energy. Whilst the other would tank Zul and the Krogs in the middle of the room. DPS just focus down the Blood Hexer, then the Crusher, whilst multi-dotters slowly bring down the dogs. And this works great, but from this point onwards, the adds will now spawn in different but set orders. In more than one instance, you'll actually have 2 Blood Hexers up at the same time. Now the issue with these guys, which we haven't already mentioned, is that they do in fact have an aura. If 2 Blood Hexers are within 20 yards of each other, they will heal all enemies for 10% of their maximum health every 2 seconds, resulting in most cases a wipe if it heals the boss at any point. Having 2 of them is problematic because the tank with Zul cannot have a Blood Hexer because of the blob ad they spawn, whilst the tank away from Zul can't have 2 of them simultaneously because of the heal aura, and this can be fixed in 2 ways. One, which isn't ideal, is 3 tanking the fight, or the second option is just to use CC. Blood Hexers technically could be crowd controlled for the entire fight. You can use things like polymorphs, hunter's traps, all those sort of things.
That's
so you'll
easy.
want to CC one of them whilst you're killing the other, only breaking CC on the second one and killing it off once the previous one is dead. Meanwhile, the tanks throughout this phase just need to be shit hot at picking up the Crushers and the Krogs, which is difficult to do until you learn all the different spawn locations and just get used to the flow and the timings of the encounter. We actually skipped a large amount of phase 1, so we can't give you the exact order and the exact spawn locations, or go into absolutely massive detail, but do expect that coming from our live guide later on this year once the expansions actually hit. Our advice for now at least would just be kill the Hexers first, then the Crushers, and then just make sure you always have this constant multi-dot and cleave on top of the dogs, just to make sure that they die eventually before they reach 100% energy. And when you've managed to deal with all those adds and you've got the boss down to 40% health, you'll transition into phase 2.
Now from this point onwards, you'll no longer have any ads spawn, but you could still have some ads from phase 1, so it's probably best that you finish those guys off nice and quickly. And also as you transition, the boss will knock you back, so don't be too close towards the edge, otherwise, yeah, everyone will laugh at you. Now you'll still have the Pool of Darkness to soak, but all other mechanics are new.
I like that. Okay.
To start off, let's talk about Death Wish, because this thing is amazing. Now this debuff is applied to 2 players, just like Dark Revelation, and the moment the debuff is applied to you, you'll lose complete control of your character, and you'll begin to walk towards the nearest edge of the platform. And once you reach the edge, you will jump off, and you will just die. Now this new debuff, fortunately, is dispellable, and when it is dispelled, it will do raid-wide damage and spawn minions of Zul, just like the Dark Revelation spell in phase 1. So it's important that you only dispel these players once they are near the edge. Now, as both players will need to be dispelled almost simultaneously, you'll probably want to use healing cooldowns for each set of Death Wish debuffs just so you can survive that initial burst. You can, however, delay dispelling between each debuff by simply life gripping one of the Death Wish debuffs back towards the raid. This will give your healers an extra 5 seconds or so just to top up the group. Now, as the debuff will immediately send you to the nearest edge, it is vital that you're pre-positioned, ready to go into a good direction, and this is mainly important because of the boss cleave. The boss in this phase deals more melee damage, but more importantly, it has rupturing blood. This frontal cone applies a stacking dot that lasts 20 seconds. If you get the Death Wish debuff whilst under the boss, you could potentially get hit by the cleave if you're just sent walking through him.
Not good.
Now the dot itself isn't too bad. The problem is that when it expires, it spawns a giant ruptured blood pool. These pools are absolutely gigantic and apply a stacking dot to anyone within them. Now whilst testing, we found that you could actually easily stack the pools, giving lots of room for people to deal with other mechanics.
Oh, that's easy.
Our guess is that they'll actually somehow prevent you from doing this on live.
Probably.
So it's safe to say that you'll probably want to slowly populate the edges of the platform.
Oh, that guy just went off the edge.
We do not know exactly what the stack number will be right now, but looking at the numbers, it'll probably be around the 5 to 6 mark. Now on top of the tank dot and the pools left behind, the Death Wish debuffs and the Pool of Darkness to soak, you'll notice that the raid has a stacking dot. Now, the boss will apply these at the start of the phase, and you'll gain more of these if you decided to go and stand in the Ruptured Blood pools.
Oh.
Now, the amount of stacks you gain is actually based on how quickly you did phase 1.
Oh.
The idea is to do phase 1 nice and quickly before this stack becomes too overwhelming for your healers in phase 2. But then again,
That's
phase
actually
2, you probably want to
complicated.
be using things like Bloodlust there instead, because you really want to
Yeah,
make sure you get out
soften
of this
rage.
phase before the whole fucking platform is covered in goo.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of the encounter. What do we think?
Before we talk about phase 2, we should probably talk about phase 1. The ads initially seem very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think we spent a good 5 pulls or so just learning exactly where the ads are spawning. And
So the ads right here, one thing I really like about this fight here is that all of the ads that you're dealing with are basically the same mechanics that you see in Underrot, right? Because like the Krogs pretty much do the same thing, right? I mean, not really the same thing, but there's basically melee mobs. And also King's Rest, excuse me, King's Rest. That's actually the one that I meant to say. King's Rest. And like the small ads are exactly the same as King's Rest. This guy is the same as Underrot. And I like how players learn the mechanics in the dungeons and then they deal with the enhanced mechanics in the raids. I think that's a very good way for you know, Blizzard to train players to know how to do things, right? LFR won't have these same abilities. Well, LFR is going to be like, all right, imagine this boss, but there's no ads and nobody dies and he just dies. Right? So like, you pull him and he dies. Done. That's it. That's LFR. It's just that easy. And if you don't do that, you get a determination buff, so you can do it next time. It's easy. Okay.
A lot of the time, it can be hard to quickly drag him away. So if something goes wrong, normally phase,
I do want to see the feedback on this, because this, I think, is going to be the first hard fight for us. So I want to make sure and see what problems they've run into, and that way I kind of know what to expect. This is normal or mythic? This is, I'm assuming normal, but I don't know.
Gain more of these if you decided to go and stand in the Ruptured Blood pools. Now, the amount of stacks you gain is actually based on how quickly you did phase 1. The idea and what ad should I really be killing?
Yeah.
Because you really want to maximize the amount of time that you can keep these ads stacked up.
I don't know why it does that.
Ideally, as close to the boss as possible so everyone can cleave it down, but then you've got to be careful of the Blood Echoes, you've got to be careful of the giant buff that the Crushers give.
Yep.
And because the boss is so difficult to actually position, because he kind of stands in place and casts quite a lot of the time, it can be hard to quickly drag him away. So if something goes wrong, normally
So these things right here are where the Krogs are going to spawn. So it actually does tell you ahead of time where they do spawn, which is a very good thing.
to actually position, because he kind of stands in place
See,
and
they're like
casts
spawning
quite a lot
right
of
there.
the time. It can be hard to quickly drag him away. So if something goes wrong, normally it's your own fault. You need to be constantly pre-planning. But once you got that in your head and you know, okay, these ads have to be here at this time.
I think I might have to tank
the
this
fight
boss.
is actually not too difficult to do.
Yeah, I think maybe I
Looking
should
back on
tank
the
this
footage,
one.
We definitely could have improved on stacking up those ads. As an example, although you do want the blood hexers to be away from the boss, they can actually be quite close, because the Ickers, although that they move at like normal
So
mob
one
speed,
hexer's in
you
the
can
front,
very
the other
quickly
one
just
gets
grip them away
CC'd.
from the boss.
Or stun them, or slow them.
Exactly,
You
yeah.
do so much to them.
Okay.
So in theory, like when you do have the two blood hexes at once, you might even be able to bring one underneath the boss and have one just stood out there with the off
Yeah, with the
tank.
CCs.
Because as long as it's
Possibly.
as long as you're quick with the
And then they
stuns,
pull
you
that
know,
one,
you
and
can actually
you're
get
not in
Icker
front of that one
time.
because
And
there's a
maybe
cleave.
with good boss mod timers, you know exactly when the Icker's going to spawn, so you could say,
But why aren't
"Hey,
they
you
pulling the other
Shaman,
one in?"
You're going to be doing this stun exactly when it spawns. One thing that they do, I think, need to add is that when you transition into phase 2, the boss very quickly starts doing his frontal cleave. And
Yes.
people, generally speaking, in phase 1 are kind of just surrounding
You hear
the
that?
boss. Because you want to kind
You
of
hear
be in
that?
4/4 of the room. The boss will normally end up being towards the middle of the room anyway.
No fuck-ups,
so they need
boys.
to give you a little bit of grace period before he starts doing his cleave, I think. Even if it's just 5 seconds or so, because we had so many pulls when we got into phase 2 where, you know, oh, suddenly 3 or 4 melee just have that debuff because they weren't pre-positioned properly. And maybe that's fine for Mythic, but I think for something like Heroic, you need to be a little bit more
Considering
forgiving.
the knockback is included
Yeah.
as you transition, it's a little bit maybe unfair that they don't give you, like, I don't know, 3
You see that
seconds
pro
just
play?
To, you know,
Make sure
Little
you're not in front of the
sidestep,
boss,
arcane
100%.
torrent, the fuck out of
But
here.
yeah, phase 2 is very, very interesting. The whole idea of having these giant areas of denial in the room, because what you need to be thinking constantly is that you do not want the Death Wish players to be running through the pools on the ground.
You don't want that.
Because, you know, they're just going to get an absolute ton of the permanent stacking dot on them. So you've got to find a position for the entire raid to stand in where the closest edge is going to be a clear path, but it also needs to be quite a long path. So it's going to be really interesting to see exactly where guilds decide to tank the boss and how they're going to be placing these pools, because otherwise, you know, people are going to get a ton of stacks, and I can imagine it going very wrong very fast.
And additionally,
so
to
that's
keep
just
in
like
mind
it's
with
a
that
soft
debuff
enrage.
is the fact that it does go on 2 players, and if your raid is stacked, both those people are going to run in the same direction.
Yeah.
So when you dispel one, it's going to instantly deal damage to the other one, who's already taking damage.
Yeah.
And then you're going to dispel him, and it's going to kill both of them.
Probably, yeah.
Fuck him, dude.
You know, like we showed with the footage, using that life grip to bring that person back so you don't dispel them both at the same time, really does carry that situation. But how many life grips are you going to have?
Well,
so you will need to
Shadow
rely.
has it now, though.
Yeah, that's true. But you are going to.
Everybody
if
has
you are
like a
gonna
movement
rely
CD.
on that strategy where you are completely stacked. You're going to need some sort of level of like using externals on those people as they move out.
Yeah.
Or even just a bit of luck and hope that someone that's, you know, positioned on the opposite side gets it instead.
We'll just
So the people
suicide him.
go-
Don't
go
worry
off
about
in
it, guys.
different Directions. But it needs a lot of coordination
That'll
from
be
your
easy.
priests with the dispels. So yeah, it's a bit of a crazy last phase. And on Mythic, this encounter is crazy. In phase 1, ads will just reincarnate unless they have a debuff on them.
But the debuff only lasts 10 seconds, and once it ends, it jumps to a new ad.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a little bit like Gorfiend on Mythic.
Yeah.
Oh,
but
wow.
with like scenario-style ads constantly.
Mythic is going to be hell.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty rough.
So we're looking forward to that one.
Oh,
but thank you very
wow.
much, guys. If you enjoyed this little preview, then do
That's
drop us down
insane.
a like. Of course, as we already said, there
So
will
you have
be a
to
live
kill the
guide for
ads
this
in
encounter,
order.
and we will touch more on phase
that means
1
you have
when
to-
we get to that point. And if you'd like to see any of the other bosses,
That means that you're not able to like just CC one of the blood hexers, I'm assuming, because it's going to alternate through them as well. And I don't know if you'd have time to just like keep all of them CC'd out of there. That would be actually insane. So that's Zul. Zul is, I would assume, probably the first hard boss. All of the other ones before this seemed pretty simple, but I feel like Zul is probably going to be the step up with, yeah, I would say Zul would probably be the step up. And this guy right here, Mithrax. Mithrax is the one that used, like, he did the beam in the cinematic. Like, I don't think I can show that. Well, I'll show you real quick, just so you guys can see who we'd be fighting, okay?